Hey, what's up, everybody? Welcome back to another episode of Everything Kratom, the podcast about anything and everything Kratom. Great to have you with us on this Wednesday morning. Hoping all is going great with you. Got some hot days over here on the East Coast, which I love. So it's a nice warm end of spring. So today, I wanted to kind of piggybacking off of yesterday where we were talking about the third in the 4-part series on these articles in Courthouse News that were talking about the negative aspects of Kratom and possible Kratom-related deaths. You know, to counter that, I'm now going to be covering some recent developments with a Colorado issue and a few deaths there, which have been getting dug into by people who, you know, are skeptical of the deaths being Kratom related. So one of your typical scenarios where there are a group of Kratom related deaths and some people don't think that those deaths are indeed Kratom related and that there's more to the story, which, you know, all of this is very related. And again, I always like to start off these episodes by saying, although I obviously am more let's say optimistic about the idea of Kratom and its utility than I am skeptical and cautious around it being super dangerous, I do have a balanced view on this, I think. Like, even though I find Kratom helpful for me and I think it helps a lot of people, I have no dang agenda, okay? I really don't. I don't care. Even though I have skin in the game, I don't. If I find out that Kratom's dangerous, I will drop it immediately and I will tell everybody, even you guys on this podcast, stop using it, okay? I don't have an agenda here, but from what I've seen so far, we're not at that point. In fact, we're pretty far from it. We're at the point where I see a lot more opportunity and positivity with Kratom. So, but I always want to keep that in mind and make sure you all know that, and that I never want to get too carried away with my positivity. Let's have a real view on it, because, you know, why wouldn't we? So here, with all that in mind, let's take a look. What's this all about? Okay, Colorado. Let's set the scene. So some researchers published an article in the New England Journal of Medicine, which is a pretty prestigious journal. You probably heard of it. And what they did was they took a look at any and all death certificates in Colorado that mentioned Kratom or metragenine between 1999 and 2017. So that's a pretty large range, you know. That's what, 18 years. 18 years. So that's what they looked at. And out of those 18 years, and out of all the death certificates in Colorado within those 18 years, they identified 15 Kratom-related deaths. And taking a look at these 15 autopsy reports, they identified 13 men and 2 women with a median age of 28 years. The range of their ages ranged from 24 to 53. So it was a bit on the younger side, based on the median age there. Then, on the basis of toxicology testing, 11 cases involved multi-drug ingestion, and the number of drugs ranged from having 2 drugs in their system to having 6. And then it says 8 persons had positive test results for other opioids. So 4 deaths were reported to involve metragenine only, and coroners attributed each to metragenine toxicity. Okay, so let's make sure that we all are on the same page here. So they started off with 15 total reports involving Kratom, right, or metragenine, from 1999 to 2017 in Colorado. Now, after going through those, they found that 11 cases involved multiple drugs, 2 to 6 drugs, okay? And then also 8 people had positive test results for other opioids. So they were able to bring that number down from 15, Kratom-related deaths to 4 deaths that only mentioned Kratom, right? And that's what you want to look at. That's what you want to focus on. And that's what I always focus on. When it says that there's another drug in someone's system or another 6 drugs in someone's system and Kratom, okay, if there's just like one other drug in their system, you have my attention, I guess. But like more than that, it's just, come on. Like really? Like, I'm not even dismissing that Kratom doesn't play a role. It's just if you have cocaine and fentanyl and Kratom, yeah, sure, Kratom helps kill you. Like, let's move on. You know, like where's the new information there? Like you've got really crazy players in that situation, right? So I want to first find out if Kratom can kill people, like directly, right? So these 4 deaths only mention mitragynine on the coroner's reports. So these researchers investigated those 4 deaths. They reviewed police investigation reports for all 4, and they performed comprehensive toxicology screening with high-performance liquid chromatography with tandem mass spectrometry for the 3 cases for which residual blood was available. So there was actually residual blood that they were able to test, okay? Then it says, in our investigation of all 15 Kratom-related deaths, we determined that 14 deaths clearly involved multiple drugs. Mitragynine levels varied widely, from 16 to 4,800 nanograms per milliliter of blood. Residual blood was not available for confirmatory testing in the remaining Kratom-related death. The final takeaway was, it is likely that mitragynine increases the risk of adverse events, especially when ingested with opioids or psychoactive drugs. Careful examination of deaths apparently due to Kratom only must include comprehensive toxicology screening. Okay. Further study is needed to assess the safety and potential effectiveness of Kratom as an herbal drug. So this mentions a few things that I think are really worth highlighting. A couple are positive, one is negative. So the positives. First off, just yet another example of the fact that there's more information that isn't published with these death certificates. So I understand those who are opposed to Kratom and who say that it has killed people and continues to kill people. I understand their reaction to the proponents of Kratom reactions to these claims. Like, they say someone has died of Kratom. People react and say, well, there must have been another drug involved. Well, that would piss me off too if I was them, because it's like, what do you know? Like, this is my family member, or this was my patient, or I'm the coroner and I looked at their body and I found that Kratom was the only thing. I mean, like, who is someone who's not there to say what that person died of? But what we keep finding is that there is more information and it does end up being another drug. Like, it's not like people who react to Kratom-related deaths in the news are reacting like out of just no information whatsoever or context. Like, it's like, well, time and time again, we have found that a Kratom-related death ends up being a Kratom and 3 other substances related death. So why wouldn't we continue to assume that that's going to keep coming out eventually, right? So I understand that aspect, although I do think that people should be respectful when someone passes away and not question the way that they died instantaneously and, yell at people who are related to them. Like, I think all that's terrible. No condoning that for sure. But I do think that there's some context that needs to be taken into account as to why people are very skeptical of the idea of a Kratom-related death. I mean, we're talking about single digits here. Like, we're talking about very, very single digits here. So much so that in 18 years of Colorado drug history of people dying, like literally 15 people have Kratom mentioned on their death certificates, and 14 of those people ended up having between 2 and 6 other drugs in their system. Like, wow. So we're talking about one death here, right? Like, that's what we're really talking about, because when you look at the table in this study, it shows the actual findings with a real whole toxicology blood test being done, as well as the notes from people on the scene of the deaths. Now, taking a look at all of this information, because there's the chart in the article and there's the supplementary information and references at the end. Here we go. Okay, I'll look at the one case that they could not use any blood to sample at the end. I'll talk about that one last. So I'm just going to do a quick summary of the 14 other cases. Okay, I did read through all of these. Okay, there are a number of them that have an absurd amount of substances involved. One person died with 3 other drugs in their system. They were found with syringes and spoons and plastic bags containing powders with the names of kratom varieties and vials labeled E447700, which is a synthetic opioid, all over themselves. That's how they were found. Okay, here's another one. Diphenhydramine, THC, edazolam, butyfentanyl, oxycodone, all of these things found in this person's system. Here's another one. There's 2 things that I cannot even begin to announce. This person was found with green powdered substance, which I'm assuming is kratom, syringes, plastic baggies, a bottle of polyethylene glycol, and empty pill capsules. Also found medications including bupropion, clonidine, diazepam, gabapentin, hydroxyzine, naltrexone. All of those were found on this person. Okay, so most of them are like that. And when I say that, I mean like most of them. There are 4, 3, 5, 6 other chemical substances involved. It's really, really crazy. So now let's narrow it in, because again, let's not be biased here. Of course, most of them have other substances. Let's try and find the ones with just like one other substance, right? And then we'll get to the one without any. So one of them, it only mentions citalopram. And that's the only other drug mentioned. And this is SSRI that's used to treat depression. It's also known as Celexa, I believe. I think I was actually prescribed this one for a little while. Citalopram and kratom. That's all that's mentioned. They were found unresponsive. That's something that I want to flag, because that, to me, it's just one other drug. It's a prescription drug. That's concerning to me. The amount of kratom in their bloodstream was quite high, but, you know, still, that is something that I would flag for anybody who is using citalopram. Please think about not using kratom, or maybe not using your medication if you want to continue using kratom. But first, do your research. So I think that that's something that we should all pay attention to. Now, let's see. Are there any others? One person, the only other substance in their body was fentanyl. Again, I don't think anyone should be using fentanyl with kratom in combination. And fentanyl is a very strong substance, so you should certainly remember that. Someone else only had oxycodone in their system as far as they could tell. Okay, that's another one. So there are these cases, these scant cases throughout, where there's only one other substance. Those are the 3, as far as I can tell. Okay, so oxycodone, fentanyl, citalopram. I think the citalopram one is the one that surprises me the most, and is one that I think everyone should be aware of. The other thing is that, if you'll remember from yesterday, the article in Courthouse News, the 3 of the 4-part series, mentioned that, you know, the kratom community has been off their rocker about making sure that any kratom-related death is discredited. Using one of those sources, I looked into it and saw that one of the kratom-related deaths that people reacted to was in Florida, and that
the case involving the person in Florida, it ended up being that person died from a combination of citalopram, cyclobenzaprine, I believe. I can't remember how to say that. And then also there was mitragynine in their system. So this is actually the second time that citalopram has popped up here. So I think that this is really something people should pay attention to. I just want to emphasize that once again. Now, there's one case in Colorado in the 18 years where kratom is the only thing that has been found. And here's the issue that these people came across. Not the issue with the case itself, but the issue with identifying if there's anything else involved. There was no residual blood to test. There was no residual blood to test for this full spectrum toxicology report, which, enabled them to find all of these substances with these other people who had died and had a kratom-related death. So that is the issue. And without having the blood sample to be able to take it, one must assume that this person died with only kratom in their body. Now, the odds, in my opinion, are that they had other substances in their system, because out of the 15 cases where kratom's mentioned, 14 of them were testable, and in those, all of them had multiple other chemicals in their system. So if one is using rationality, one would assume that there's probably other substances in this person's system. But since there is not the residual blood, I will, for the time being, say there's one case that only has kratom in their system as far as we can tell. And that's something that we should take note of and say, okay, there's one. There's one. Let's see if we can find another one out there in the bajillion deaths that happen from drug overdoses. We have one that's from kratom, apparently. It's hard not to start creating a narrative from all of this that makes kratom not the enemy. I have a tough time, but it's important to see things how they are. On the one hand, I don't want to be biased, and this is always the internal struggle with myself. I don't want to be biased for kratom, and I think I do a pretty good job of being balanced on it. On the other hand, I'm a logical person and I will not ignore data. And from all the data I'm seeing from this, it seems like no one has ever died from just kratom in Colorado except one person, and we just can't test their blood. So that's the toss-up, right? Being very aware of your biases and getting rid of those, but then also identifying facts where you see them, and then also making what would it be called? Logically informed inferences about the one unknown, which is that person whose blood you can't test. And logically, I would infer that from 14 other cases that were similar and ended up having 6 substances, 5, 4, 3 substances in their body in addition, and then 3 with just another substance, that this person likely had at least something else in their body. But that's really just looking at the odds, right? So who knows for certain. So that's going to be it for today. Again, I left this in the description of this episode. You can look into this more if you like. There's a lot of other information in here, and I just try to cover some of the key aspects in case you're not going to read through it yourself. But I try not to go over everything in case you want to do some sleuthing yourself. Okay, everybody, have a great rest of your day. Remain logical, but also, check yourself with biases. Make sure you're thinking about this stuff clearly. I think my takeaway from this, I've already been wary about kratom being combined with opioids, and I don't think that's a good idea. This further confirms that idea for me. So now oxycodone and fentanyl really don't seem like a good idea to combine with kratom. Citalopram. That's the thing that I would take away from this as a big negative. I definitely didn't expect to see one fairly common antidepressant, SSRI, in combination with kratom, resulting in a death. But after a full spectrum toxicology report on this person's blood sample, that's the only other thing they could find, you know, you have to look at the science and go along with it. So in checking my bias, I will now be looking into that. And I'm concerned that people who take SSRIs, and specifically citalopram, could be at a higher risk of something very bad happening when combining it with kratom. Of course, I'm not trying to raise the alarms on anyone, but let's look at the facts and move on from there, right? So let's just be rational. So that's all for today. Thanks so much for listening in, and we will be back tomorrow. All right, take it easy, everybody. Have a great rest of your day. Bye-bye.